Now that Mom is dead, Grief, grab your rags and get out, my daughter said at the table. My son-in-law just laughed. You were always just a guest here. I left without a word. The next day, I went to the notary and I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is George, and I never imagined that the worst day of my life would get even darker. I had just buried my beloved wife, Eleanor, 3 hours earlier, and my whole body still ached from the weight of throwing dirt on her casket. The funeral service had been small, intimate, just the way Eleanor would have wanted. A few neighbors, some old friends, and of course my daughter Mia and her husband Melvin. I should have known something was wrong when Mia spent the entire service checking her phone. She sat in the front pew next to me, but her attention was everywhere except on her mother's farewell. Melvin kept whispering in her ear, and every few minutes she would nod and glance at me with a look I couldn't quite decipher. At the time, I thought it was grief. Now I know it was calculation. After the burial, we returned to the house, the same house where Eleanor and I had raised Mia, where we had celebrated every Christmas morning, where we had weathered 42 years of marriage together. The walls were still covered with family photos. Eleanor's reading glasses still sat on the kitchen table, and her favorite lavender scent still lingered in the air. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and all I wanted was to sit quietly with my memories. Maybe look through some of Eleanor's photo albums, or just hold her favorite coffee mug. I needed time to process that the love of my life was gone forever. But Mia had other plans. She was standing in the dining room when I walked in, her arms crossed, wearing the same black dress she had worn to the funeral. But something about her posture was different now. The fake sadness from the service was gone, replaced by something cold and businesslike. "Dad, we need to talk," she said without any preamble. I nodded, assuming she wanted to discuss funeral expenses or maybe go through some of Eleanor's belongings together. "Of course, sweetheart. Do you want some coffee? Your mother just bought some of that flavored creamer you like." She shook her head sharply. "No, Dad, this isn't that kind of conversation." Melvin appeared from the kitchen, carrying what looked like a sandwich. He was actually eating while we were supposed to be mourning. The man had just watched his mother-in-law get buried, and he was treating our house like a restaurant. "Sit down, George," Melvin said, gesturing to one of the dining room chairs. I bristled at his tone. In all the 8 years he had been married to Mia, Melvin had never spoken to me with anything resembling respect. He was 34 years old, worked sporadically in sales, and seemed to think that marrying my daughter gave him some kind of authority in my home. "I think I'll stand," I replied quietly. Mia sighed dramatically. "Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Make what harder?" She exchanged a glance with Melvin, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked back at me with eyes that seemed like a stranger's. "Now that Mom is dead, grab your rags and get out." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step backward, convinced I had misheard. "What did you say?" "You heard me," she continued, her voice growing stronger and more confident. "Mom was the only reason we tolerated you living here, but she's gone now and we don't need you anymore." Melvin started laughing, actually laughing at my shock and pain. "Come on, George, don't look so surprised. You were always just a guest here anyway. Mia and I have been planning this for months." I stared at my daughter, searching her face for any sign of the little girl who used to run to me when she scraped her knee, who used to beg me to read her bedtime stories, who used to tell everyone that her daddy was the strongest man in the world. That little girl was gone. In her place stood someone I didn't recognize. "Mia," I whispered, "this is my house. Your mother and I bought this house before you were even born." She shrugged. "Not anymore, it isn't. Mom left everything to me, remember? The house, the car, the bank accounts, everything. You're nobody now." The room started to spin slightly. Eleanor had been handling our finances for the past few years because I had never been good with paperwork. I trusted her completely and I knew she would take care of everything. But I had never thought to ask about the specific details of her will. "You have until tomorrow morning to pack your stuff and get out," Mia continued. And don't take anything that belonged to Mom. I'll know if you do. Melvin took another bite of his sandwich and added, there are some nice senior living facilities downtown. I'm sure you can find something in your price range. I looked around the dining room where we had shared thousands of meals as a family, the table where I had helped Mia with her homework when she was young, the chairs where Eleanor and I had sat together every morning for over 4 decades, drinking coffee and planning our days. You're throwing me out, I said slowly, still trying to process what was happening. On the day I buried your mother, you're throwing me out of my own home. It's not your home anymore, Mia replied coldly. Try to keep up. Something inside me shifted in that moment. A lifetime of memories crashed over me. Every sacrifice I had made for this family, every overtime hour I had worked to pay for Mia's dance lessons and school clothes, every dream I had postponed so that she could have what she needed. I thought about Eleanor lying in her casket just hours ago, and I wondered what she would think of this scene. Would she have approved of Mia's cruelty? Had she really left me with nothing? Without saying another word, I turned and walked toward the stairs. Behind me, I could hear Mia and Melvin talking in low, excited voices. They sounded like children who had just gotten away with stealing candy from a store. I went to the bedroom Eleanor and I had shared and sat on the edge of the bed. Her pillow still smelled like her shampoo. Her jewelry box was still open on the dresser, exactly as she had left it the morning she went to the hospital for the last time. For a moment, I considered fighting them. I could call a lawyer, contest the will, make their lives difficult. But I was 62 years old, tired, and heartbroken. The idea of a legal battle with my own daughter felt like more than I could bear. So instead, I packed a single suitcase with my clothes and personal items. I left behind the photo albums, the furniture we had chosen together, even my favorite coffee mug. None of it seemed to matter anymore. As I walked toward the front door with my suitcase, Mia was waiting for me in the hallway. For a split second, I thought maybe she had reconsidered. Maybe she would apologize, tell me this was all a mistake brought on by grief. Instead, she held out her hand. House keys. I stared at her outstretched palm, feeling something break inside me that I didn't think could be repaired. My own daughter was treating me like a stranger who had overstayed his welcome. I pulled the keys from my pocket and dropped them into her hand. Our fingers didn't touch. Goodbye, Dad, she said, and there was no emotion in her voice at all. I opened the front door and stepped outside. It was getting dark and the autumn air was cold against my face. I had nowhere to go, no plan, no idea what I was supposed to do next. Behind me, I heard the door close and the deadbolt turn. They had locked me out of the only home I had known for 28 years. I stood there for a long moment holding my suitcase and looking back at the house where I had been happy for so long. The windows glowed warm and yellow, and I could see Mia and Melvin moving around inside. They were already making themselves comfortable in what they now considered their space. As I walked away down the street, I heard Melvin's voice through an open window. Finally, I thought the old man would never leave. Their laughter followed me into the darkness. I spent that night in a cheap motel room that smelled like cigarettes and disinfectant. I lay on the thin mattress staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how my life had fallen apart so completely in a single day. Eleanor was gone. My daughter had thrown me away like garbage. I was alone, nearly broke, and homeless at 62 years old. But as I lay there in that awful little room, something strange began to happen. The shock and grief were still there, but underneath them I could feel something else growing. Something harder and colder than anything I had felt before. Anger. By morning, I had made a decision. I was going to the lawyer's office to get a copy of Eleanor's will. I needed to see for myself exactly what she had left behind, and I needed to understand how Mia had gained control of everything so quickly. Because something about this whole situation didn't feel right. Eleanor had been many things, but careless with important documents wasn't one of them. And in all our years together, she had never once suggested that she planned to leave me with nothing. I had a feeling that Mia and Melvin were about to learn that their cruel game had consequences they hadn't considered. The old man they had just discarded wasn't quite as helpless as they thought. The next morning, I stood outside the law office of Henderson and Associates feeling like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. My reflection in the glass door showed someone I barely recognized, hollow-eyed, unshaven, wearing the same clothes I had slept in at that miserable motel. But I was here for a reason, and I wasn't leaving until I got answers. Eleanor had used this firm for over 15 years. James Henderson had handled everything from our house purchase to her business dealings when she ran her small accounting practice. If anyone knew the truth about what Eleanor had really left behind, it would be him. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, looked up as I entered. "Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Henderson is expecting you." I had called first thing that morning, explaining that I needed to discuss my late wife's estate. James had agreed to see me immediately, which I found both reassuring and strange. In my experience, lawyers didn't usually clear their schedules for walk-in appointments. James Henderson was a man in his 50s with graying hair and the careful demeanor of someone who had spent decades delivering difficult news to grieving families. But when he looked at me across his mahogany desk, I saw something unexpected in his expression. Relief. "George," he said, gesturing for me to sit down. "I was hoping you would come in today. I've been quite concerned about you since Eleanor's passing." "I need to see her will," I said without preamble. "My daughter says she inherited everything, but something doesn't feel right about this whole situation." James frowned. "Your daughter? Mia?" "Yes. She threw me out of my house yesterday. Said Eleanor left everything to her and that I'm homeless now." The lawyer's frown deepened. "George, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. Let me get Eleanor's file." He walked to a large filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. When he returned to his desk, he opened it carefully and began flipping through pages. His expression grew more troubled with each document he reviewed. "George," he said slowly, "I need to ask you something very important. Did Eleanor ever discuss her will with you? Did she ever mention making any major changes to it?" "No," I replied. "She said she was taking care of everything and that I didn't need to worry about it. Eleanor always handled our paperwork." James nodded grimly. "That's what I was afraid of." He pulled out a document and turned it toward me. "This is Eleanor's actual will, dated 18 months ago. According to this legal document, you inherit everything, the house, the bank accounts, her investments, all of it. Mia receives a small inheritance of $5,000 and some personal items." I stared at the document, trying to process what he was telling me. "But Mia said—" "Mia has been lying to you," James interrupted. "And what's more concerning is how she gained access to your house and convinced you to leave. Legally speaking, she had no right to throw you out of your own home." The room began to spin slightly. "So the house is mine?" "Yes, and George, there's something else you need to know." James pulled out another document. "Eleanor left you far more than just the house. She had been quite successful with her accounting business over the years, and she made some very smart investments. According to her estate, you're inheriting approximately $120,000 in total assets." I nearly fell out of my chair. 120,000? The house is worth about 85,000, and there's 35,000 in various bank accounts and investments. Eleanor was quite financially savvy. My mind was reeling. Eleanor had never told me about any investments. I knew she had done well with her small business, but I had no idea she had accumulated that kind of money. "There's more," James continued. "Eleanor came to see me about 6 weeks before she died. She was very concerned about something, and she made some specific additions to her will." He pulled out yet another document. "She added what's called a conditional clause. If anyone attempts to defraud you or illegally remove you from your property, they forfeit any inheritance they might have received. In other words, if Mia tried to steal from you, she would lose even that $5,000. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. "So Mia gets nothing now?" "Correct. By throwing you out and claiming she owned everything, she violated the terms of the will. She has forfeited her inheritance entirely." James leaned forward, his expression serious. "George, I need to tell you something else. Eleanor came to see me one more time, just 2 weeks before she died. She was very upset about something. She said she had overheard a conversation between Mia and her husband and that she was afraid they were planning to take advantage of you after her death. The pieces were starting to fall into place. What kind of conversation? Eleanor wouldn't give me all the details, but she said they were discussing how to get control of the house quickly after her death. She was particularly concerned about something Mia had said about putting you in a nursing home. My blood ran cold. A nursing home? Eleanor was convinced that Mia and Melvin were planning to have you declared incompetent somehow so they could gain control of your assets. That's why she added the protective clauses to her will. I thought back to yesterday's conversation. Melvin's comment about senior living facilities suddenly took on a much darker meaning. They hadn't just been trying to get rid of me. They had been planning to steal everything Eleanor and I had worked for our entire lives. "There's one more thing," James said. "Eleanor left you a sealed letter. She said to give it to you only after her death, and only if you came to see me about the will." He handed me a cream-colored envelope with my name written in Eleanor's careful handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was 3 pages long, and with each sentence I read, my anger grew stronger. "My dearest George," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I suspect that Mia has already shown her true colors. I am so sorry, my love, but I have known for months that our daughter is not the person we raised her to be." The letter went on to detail everything Eleanor had discovered. She had been secretly recording conversations when Mia visited, and she had uncovered a plan that was even more sinister than I had imagined. Mia and Melvin had been planning this for over a year. They had researched elder abuse laws, consulted with lawyers about how to have elderly parents declared incompetent, and even looked into nursing homes where they could place me against my will. But the worst part was what Eleanor had overheard just a month before she died. Mia had been on the phone with someone discussing how much money they would save on my care if they just isolated me completely. "She said it would be easier if you just died naturally from loneliness and neglect," Eleanor had written. "She talked about you like you were a burden that needed to be disposed of efficiently." I felt sick. My own daughter had been planning not just to steal from me, but to essentially abandon me, to die alone and forgotten. The letter concluded with instructions. Eleanor had hidden additional documentation in our bedroom behind a loose floorboard under our bed. She had been collecting evidence of Mia's plans for months, including phone records and financial documents that proved Mia had already been stealing small amounts of money from our accounts. "You are stronger than she thinks," Eleanor had written. "Don't let our daughter destroy the life we built together. Fight for what is rightfully yours and don't let her cruelty go unpunished. I love you forever." I folded the letter carefully and looked up at James. "What do I do now?" "First, we're going to get you back into your house legally. I'll draft a notice that Mia has 24 hours to vacate the property. Then we're going to make sure she understands exactly what she's lost by trying to cheat you." James pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police right now to report the theft of your property. What Mia did yesterday was illegal, and she needs to face the consequences." As James spoke to the police, I sat there thinking about the past 24 hours. Yesterday, I had been a broken old man with nothing left to live for. Today, I was discovering that I had resources I never knew existed, and a wife who had loved me enough to protect me, even after her death. But more importantly, I was learning that Mia and Melvin had underestimated me completely. They thought they were dealing with a helpless old fool who would just disappear quietly. They had no idea that Eleanor had been 10 steps ahead of them all along. By tomorrow, they would discover that their cruel little game had cost them everything they thought they were going to steal, and I was going to make sure they understood exactly what that meant. 3 hours after leaving the lawyer's office, I stood on the sidewalk in front of what Mia thought was now her house, watching through the window as she and Melvin celebrated their supposed victory. They had opened a bottle of wine and were toasting each other in my living room, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to hit them. I wasn't alone this time. Officer Patricia Williams stood beside me, along with James Henderson, who had insisted on coming to witness what he called the correction of a grave injustice. In my pocket, I carried copies of Eleanor's real will, the documentation of Mia's forfeiture, and most importantly, the key to my own front door that James had retrieved from Eleanor's safety deposit box. "Are you ready for this, George?" Officer Williams asked quietly. She was a woman in her early 40s with kind but determined eyes. When James had called the police, she had been assigned to the case, and she had listened to our story with growing outrage. "I've been ready for this conversation for a long time," I replied, though my hands were trembling slightly. "I just didn't know it until today." The three of us walked up the front path together. I could hear Mia's laughter through the door, sharp and self-satisfied. She was probably already planning how to redecorate Eleanor's house, or maybe discussing which of my belongings they would sell first. I used Eleanor's key to open the front door and stepped inside my own home. The laughter stopped immediately. Mia and Melvin were sitting on the couch in the living room, wine glasses in their hands, looking like deer caught in headlights. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Mia shot to her feet, wine sloshing over the rim of her glass. "What the hell are you doing here?" she demanded. "I told you to stay away. This is my house now." "Actually," I said calmly, "this is my house. It always has been, and according to your mother's will, it always will be." Melvin stood up beside her, his face flushing red. "We already went through this yesterday, old man. Eleanor left everything to Mia. You need to accept reality and get out." Officer Williams stepped forward, her badge clearly visible. "Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down and listen carefully to what Mr. Mitchell has to say." Mia's eyes darted between the three of us, and I could see the first flicker of uncertainty in her expression. "What is this? Why is there a police officer here?" James Henderson cleared his throat. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm James Henderson, your mother's attorney. There's been a serious misunderstanding about your mother's estate, and I'm here to set the record straight." "There's no misunderstanding," Mia said, but her voice was less confident now. "Mom left everything to me. I have the papers." "I'd like to see those papers," James replied smoothly. Mia glanced at Melvin, who nodded toward the kitchen. She hurried away and returned a moment later with a folder. She pulled out a document and thrust it toward James with shaking hands. James took the paper and examined it carefully. His expression remained neutral, but I could see his jaw tighten slightly. After a long moment, he looked up at Mia. "This is a forged document," he said quietly. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mia's face went completely white. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I found it in Mom's desk. It's her will." "This is a crude forgery of an outdated version of your mother's will from 7 years ago," James continued. "It's been altered to remove your father's name and insert yours as the primary beneficiary. Your mother never signed this document." Melvin stepped forward aggressively. "You're lying. You're all conspiring against us." Officer Williams moved to intercept him. "Sir, I need you to step back and remain calm." I watched Mia carefully as the truth began to sink in. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, and she kept looking back and forth between the forged will and James Henderson as if she could will reality to be different. "Show her the real will," I said to James. He pulled out the authentic document and handed it to Mia. "This is your mother's actual will, dated 18 months ago and properly witnessed. As you can see, your father inherits the house, all bank accounts, and all assets. Your inheritance was $5,000 and some personal items." Mia snatched the will from his hands and read it frantically. As her eyes moved down the page, her expression changed from disbelief to desperation to rage. "This is impossible," she said, her voice rising. "Mom promised me everything. She told me Dad would be taken care of, but that I would get the house." "Your mother made no such promise," James replied. "In fact, she was so concerned about protecting your father from exactly this kind of deception that she added special clauses to her will." He pulled out another document. "These are the conditional clauses your mother added. If anyone attempted to defraud your father or illegally remove him from his property, they would forfeit any inheritance they might have received." I watched Mia's face as James explained what this meant. The $5,000 she had been entitled to inherit was now gone forever. By throwing me out of my own house and trying to steal everything Eleanor and I had built together, she had lost even the small amount her mother had left her. "You get nothing," I said quietly. "Nothing at all." Mia's legs seemed to give out. She collapsed back onto the couch, still clutching the real will in her trembling hands. This can't be happening. Melvin, however, was not ready to give up. "This is all fake," he said loudly. "You people are trying to steal from us. Mia's mother left her that house and we're not leaving." Officer Williams stepped closer to him. "Sir, you need to understand that you're currently illegally occupying this property. Mr. Mitchell is the rightful owner and you have no legal right to be here." "I don't care what you say," Melvin shot back. "We live here now. We've been taking care of this place. The old man can't even take care of himself." That was when I decided to reveal the rest of what Eleanor had left me. "Melvin," I said calmly, "before you dig yourself any deeper into this hole, there's something else you should know." I pulled Eleanor's letter from my pocket. "Your wife's mother knew exactly what you two were planning. She wrote me a letter explaining everything she had discovered about your scheme." Mia looked up from the will, her face streaked with tears. "What scheme? We weren't scheming anything." "Eleanor knew you had been stealing small amounts of money from our accounts for months," I continued. "She knew you had researched how to have me declared incompetent. She knew you had been planning to put me in a nursing home against my will." James nodded and pulled out a thick folder. "Your mother also left detailed documentation of phone records, bank statements, and other evidence of your activities. She had been building a case against you for quite some time." "But the worst part," I said, looking directly into Mia's eyes, "was when your mother heard you on the phone discussing how much easier it would be if I just died from loneliness and neglect." Mia's mouth fell open. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Melvin, meanwhile, had turned a sickly gray color. "She recorded our conversations?" "She recorded everything," Officer Williams said. "And what you two were planning constitutes elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. You're both looking at serious criminal charges." The room fell into stunned silence. Mia was now sobbing quietly, still holding the will that proved she would inherit nothing. Melvin was pacing back and forth, his hands clenched into fists. "There has to be a way to fix this," he muttered. "There has to be something we can do." "Actually, there is," I said. Everyone turned to look at me. "You can pack your belongings and leave my house, immediately. You can return anything you've stolen from me. And you can pray that I decide not to press criminal charges against you." Mia looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Dad, please, I'm your daughter. This is all just a misunderstanding." "No," I replied firmly. "A misunderstanding is when you forget to call on my birthday. This is cruelty, this is greed, this is you trying to steal everything your mother and I worked for our entire lives." I walked closer to her. "Yesterday, you told me to grab my rags and get out. You laughed at me when I was grieving. You treated me like garbage on the worst day of my life." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I didn't mean it. I was upset about Mom dying, and I wasn't thinking clearly." "You meant every word," I said. "And now you're going to live with the consequences." Officer Williams cleared her throat. "Mr. Mitchell, what would you like to do about pressing charges?" I looked at Mia, sobbing on my couch, and at Melvin, who was now staring at the floor in defeat. Part of me wanted to see them both arrested. Part of me wanted them to suffer the way they had made me suffer. But Eleanor's letter had ended with a reminder that I was better than they were. "I want them out of my house within the next hour," I said finally. "They can take their personal belongings, but nothing else. If they're gone by 6 o'clock tonight and they never contact me again, I won't press charges." Mia looked up at me with desperate hope. "Really? You'll let us go?" "I'm giving you one chance to disappear from my life with what little dignity you have left," I replied. "Don't waste it." James Henderson began packing up his documents. "Mr. Mitchell, I'll need you to come by the office tomorrow to finalize the estate transfer and take care of some paperwork." As the lawyer and police officer prepared to leave, Mia stood up on shaky legs. Dad, I know I made mistakes, but you're still my father. Can't we work this out somehow? I looked at her for a long moment. This was the daughter I had raised, the little girl I had loved unconditionally for 36 years. But that little girl was gone, and the woman who had replaced her was someone I didn't recognize or trust. You stopped being my daughter yesterday, I said quietly. When you chose cruelty over compassion, greed over grief, and money over family. I turned toward the front door. You have 57 minutes to get out of my house. As I walked outside with James and Officer Williams, I could hear Mia starting to cry again. This time, I didn't look back. I returned to my house exactly 1 hour later to find Mia's car still in the driveway. Through the living room window, I could see her and Melvin in what appeared to be a heated argument. Melvin was gesturing wildly with his hands while Mia sat on the edge of the couch with her head in her hands. When I walked through the front door, their conversation stopped abruptly. "Time's up," announced calmly. Melvin whirled around to face me, his face red with anger. "We need more time. This is insane. You can't just throw us out onto the street." "I can and I am," I replied. "You had an hour to collect your things and leave. Since you're still here, I assume you've decided you'd prefer to discuss this matter with the police after all." I pulled out my cell phone and started to dial Officer Williams' number. "Wait!" Mia jumped up from the couch. "Please don't call them. We'll go right now." "Too late for that," I said, continuing to dial. "You had your chance to leave with dignity." "Dad, please," Mia begged, stepping toward me. "I know we messed up, but we're family. Families forgive each other." I paused with my finger over the call button and looked at her. Really looked at her. Mia was 36 years old, but in that moment she looked like a teenager who had been caught doing something terrible and was trying to charm her way out of consequences. "Family," I repeated slowly. "Yesterday, when I needed family the most, you told me to grab my rags and get out. Today, when you need something from me, suddenly, we're family again." Melvin stepped forward aggressively. "Look, old man, you're not as smart as you think you are. We've been living in this house for 3 months, taking care of everything while Eleanor was sick. That has to count for something legally." I almost laughed. 3 months? Is that what you think?" They both stared at me. "Eleanor started documenting your activities over a year ago," I continued. "Every time you visited, every conversation you had in this house, every time you went through our papers when you thought we weren't looking, she knew exactly what you were doing the entire time." I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out what looked like an ordinary photo album. But when I opened it, instead of family pictures, it was full of printed emails, bank statements, and handwritten notes in Eleanor's careful script. "Your mother was a bookkeeper for 40 years, I said to Mia. "Did you really think she wouldn't notice when small amounts of money started disappearing from our accounts?" Mia's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." I flipped to a page near the back of the album. "March 15th of last year. $67 withdrawn from our checking account using the debit card that went missing from Eleanor's purse. We thought we had lost it, but Eleanor found it in your purse 2 days later when you came to visit." I turned another page. "April 22nd. $115 charged to our credit card at a restaurant where you and Melvin had dinner. You used the card that Eleanor kept in her desk drawer for emergencies." With each entry I read, Mia seemed to shrink smaller. Melvin, meanwhile, was looking around the room as if searching for an escape route. "June 8th, I continued. "Eleanor overheard you and Melvin in the kitchen, discussing how much the house would be worth if it were sold quickly. You were already planning this while your mother was still alive and fighting cancer." Mia finally found her voice. "We weren't stealing. We were just borrowing small amounts here and there. We were going to pay it back." "With what money?" I asked. "Melvin hasn't held a steady job in 2 years. You work part-time at a gift shop. Where exactly was this payback money going to come from?" The truth was, I already knew the answer. According to Eleanor's notes, they had been planning to pay back the stolen money using the inheritance they thought Mia would receive. They had been stealing from us to fund their lifestyle while they waited for Eleanor to die so they could steal everything else. "But here's the part that really broke your mother's heart," I said, flipping to the very last entry in the album. August 31st. Eleanor was lying in her hospital bed, barely conscious, when you two came to visit. She heard you discussing whether it would be worth paying for any more of her medical treatments or if it would be better financially to just let her die. Mia's face crumpled. We didn't say that. That's not what happened. I read directly from Eleanor's notes written in her shaky handwriting from her final hospital stay. Mia asked Melvin if they should tell the doctors to stop the expensive treatments. Melvin said it would be better to let nature take its course so there would be more inheritance money left over. The room fell into complete silence. Even Melvin seemed to realize he couldn't talk his way out of this one. You discussed letting your mother die to save money, I said quietly. While she was lying there fighting for her life, you were calculating how much her death would be worth to you. Mia collapsed back onto the couch, sobbing. We were scared. We didn't know how we were going to pay our bills. We thought if Mom left us some money, we could get back on our feet. So you decided to speed up the process, I said. No. We never would have actually done anything to hurt her. I looked down at the album again. September 5th. Eleanor heard you researching nursing homes on your phone. You were specifically looking for places with high mortality rates and poor reputations for care. Melvin finally exploded. This is all fake. That crazy old woman was paranoid and delusional. She made all this stuff up because she was losing her mind. That was the wrong thing to say. I closed the album carefully and set it back on the shelf. When I turned around, my expression must have been frightening because both Mia and Melvin took a step backward. Eleanor had cancer, I said, my voice deadly calm. She was not losing her mind. She was sharp and alert right up until the day she died. And every single thing in that album is documented with dates, times, and corroborating evidence. I walked closer to them. But even if none of that mattered, even if you had never stolen a penny from us, what you did yesterday was unforgivable. Mia looked up at me through her tears. What do you mean? I had just buried my wife of 42 years. I was broken, grieving, lost, and instead of offering comfort or support, you saw an opportunity to kick me when I was down. You enjoyed it. I pointed at Melvin. You laughed at my pain. You made jokes about putting me in a nursing home. You treated the worst moment of my life like entertainment. Then I turned to Mia. And you, my own daughter, looked me in the eye and told me to grab my rags and get out. On the day I buried your mother, you chose to destroy me. Mia was sobbing harder now. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I was grieving too, and I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking very clearly, I corrected. You had been planning this for months. Yesterday wasn't grief talking, it was greed. I walked to the front door and opened it. Get out of my house. Take your belongings and leave. If you're not gone in the next 10 minutes, I'm calling the police and pressing every charge I can think of. Melvin started toward the stairs. Fine, but this isn't over. We'll fight this in court. We'll prove that will is fake. Actually, I said, it is over. Because there's one more thing Eleanor left me that I haven't mentioned yet. They both stopped and turned around. She left me recordings, I said simply. The blood drained from both of their faces. Eleanor had been secretly recording your conversations for months. Every cruel thing you said about me, every plan you made to steal from us, every discussion about letting her die for money, it's all recorded and documented. Mia sank to her knees right there in the hallway. Oh God, oh my God. Those recordings are currently in James Henderson's possession, I continued. If you ever try to contest the will, if you ever try to claim you have any right to anything Eleanor and I owned, if you even try to contact me again, those recordings will be turned over to the police and the district attorney's office. Melvin was backing toward the door. We don't want any trouble. We'll just take our stuff and go. You have 9 minutes, I said, looking at my watch. They scrambled upstairs to gather their belongings. I could hear them throwing things into suitcases, arguing in whispered voices about what to take and what to leave behind. 8 minutes later, they were back downstairs with 2 suitcases each. Mia paused at the front door and turned back to me one last time. Her face was streaked with tears and mascara, and she looked like someone whose entire world had just collapsed. Dad, she whispered, I know you probably can't forgive me right now, but maybe someday—" "Someday what?" I asked. "Maybe someday you'll remember that you loved me once." I looked at her standing there in the doorway, holding her suitcases and waiting for some sign that there might be hope for reconciliation in the future. "I did love you," I said quietly. "I loved you more than anything in the world. That's what makes this so much worse." She waited, as if hoping I would say something else. "The daughter I loved would never have done what you did yesterday," I continued. "That daughter died when you chose cruelty over compassion. I'm mourning her loss right along with your mother's." Mia's face crumpled completely. Without another word, she turned and walked to the car. As I watched them drive away, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel: relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, my house was truly mine. The people who had been bleeding me dry, manipulating me, and planning my destruction were gone. I was alone, but I was free. And tomorrow I would begin to figure out what the rest of my life was going to look like. 2 weeks after throwing Mia and Melvin out of my house, I was sitting in James Henderson's office reviewing the final estate documents when his secretary knocked on the door. "Mr. Henderson," she said quietly, "there's a young woman here who says she needs to speak with Mr. Mitchell urgently. She's quite upset." James and I exchanged glances. We both knew who it was. "Send her in," I said. Mia walked into the office looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She looked around the room frantically before her gaze settled on me. "Dad, thank God you're here. I've been trying to find you for 3 days." I didn't stand up or acknowledge her greeting. "What do you want, Mia?" "I need to talk to you. There are things you don't understand. Melvin, he made me do things. He convinced me that you were going to lose the house anyway and that if we didn't act fast, we'd all end up homeless." James cleared his throat. "Ms. Mitchell, you should know that everything you say here can be used as evidence if your father decides to pursue criminal charges." Mia's eyes darted between us. "Criminal charges? Dad, you said you wouldn't press charges if we left." "I said I wouldn't press charges if you disappeared from my life," I corrected. "Yet here you are." She stepped closer to my chair. "Please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I leaned back and crossed my arms. "You have 5 minutes." Mia took a shaky breath. "After we left your house, everything fell apart. Melvin blamed me for ruining everything. He said I should have been smarter about handling you, that I should have waited longer before making you leave." "So this is Melvin's fault now?" I asked. "No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to explain that I was being manipulated too. Melvin had been telling me for months that you were getting senile, that you couldn't take care of yourself anymore. He said Mom had told him she was worried about leaving you alone in that big house." I felt my jaw clench. "Your mother never said any such thing." "I know that now," Mia said quickly. "But at the time, I believed him. He showed me articles about elderly people who died alone in their homes because their families didn't intervene soon enough. He made me think that putting you in a care facility was the responsible thing to do." James made a note on his legal pad. "What about the stolen money? Was that Melvin's idea too?" Mia's face flushed red. "We were desperate. Melvin lost his job 8 months ago, and I'm only working part-time. We couldn't make rent, and we were about to be evicted. Melvin said it wasn't really stealing because I was going to inherit everything anyway." "But you weren't going to inherit everything," I pointed out. "Eleanor's real will left you $5,000. That's all." "I didn't know that," Mia protested. "Melvin found that old will in Mom's desk, and he said it proved that she wanted me to have the house. He said the lawyer must have made a mistake with the newer version." I studied my daughter's face. Even now, even after everything that had happened, she was still trying to shift the blame to someone else. Melvin had certainly been a bad influence, but Mia was a 36-year-old woman who had made her own choices. "What happened after you left my house?" I asked. Mia's expression crumpled. Melvin left me. The same night we packed our stuff, he said this was all my fault for not being able to handle my own father. He took one of the suitcases and walked out. I haven't seen him since. Despite everything she had done to me, I felt a small pang of sympathy. Melvin had used her just as much as she had tried to use me. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "In my car," she admitted quietly. "I couldn't afford a motel after the first few nights. I've been sleeping in the parking lot behind the grocery store." James looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Mitchell, there are shelters and social services that can help you." Mia shook her head. "I tried. But they have waiting lists and they ask too many questions. I just need a chance to get back on my feet." She turned back to me with desperate eyes. "Dad, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. I don't need the inheritance money. I don't need the house. I just need a place to stay for a few weeks while I figure out what to do next." I sat quietly for a long moment, thinking. Part of me wanted to help her. No matter what she had done, she was still the little girl I had raised, and seeing her homeless and desperate was painful. But another part of me remembered the cruel laughter in her voice when she told me to grab my rags and get out. I remembered the coldness in her eyes when she talked about putting me in a nursing home. I remembered Eleanor's notes about Mia and Melvin discussing whether to let her mother die to save money. "No," I said finally. Mia's face went white. "Dad, please, I'm your daughter." "You were my daughter," I corrected. "The day you chose to kick me while I was down, you stopped being my family." Tears started streaming down her face. "I made a mistake. People make mistakes. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "A mistake is forgetting to call on my birthday," I said, echoing what I had told her before. "What you did was calculated cruelty. You planned it, you executed it, and you enjoyed it." James cleared his throat again. "Mr. Mitchell, if I may suggest something." I nodded. "There might be a way to handle this that benefits everyone involved," he said carefully. "Your daughter clearly needs help, and you have resources that could provide that help, but it would have to be done in a way that protects you from future manipulation." Mia looked between us hopefully. "What kind of way?" James pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "A conditional assistance agreement. Your father could provide limited financial help for you to get back on your feet, but only if you agree to specific terms and conditions." "What kind of terms?" Mia asked. "First," James said, "you would have to admit in writing that you stole money from your parents, that you attempted to defraud your father, and that you treated him cruelly during his time of grief." Mia's face flushed. "You want me to confess to crimes?" "You want me to help you after you tried to destroy me," I replied. "If you're serious about making amends, you'll be willing to take responsibility for what you did." James continued. "Second, you would agree to have no claim whatsoever to any of your father's assets, now or in the future. If he chooses to leave you something in his will, that's his decision, but you would waive any right to contest it if he doesn't. And third," I added, "you would agree to get counseling, real counseling with a licensed therapist, to figure out how you became the kind of person who could treat your own father the way you treated me." Mia sat quietly for several minutes, processing what we were offering. Finally, she looked up at me. "If I agree to all of that, what would you give me in return?" I had already thought about this. "I would pay for a modest apartment for 6 months. I would give you $5,000 to get back on your feet, the same amount you would have inherited if you hadn't forfeited it. And I would pay for your counseling sessions." "That's very generous," James noted. "It's more than generous," I said, looking directly at Mia. "It's more than you deserve after what you put me through." Mia was crying again, but they seemed like different tears now, less desperate, more ashamed. "Why would you do that for me?" she whispered. I thought about Eleanor, lying in her hospital bed, making me promise to take care of our daughter even if she didn't deserve it. I thought about the little girl who used to crawl into my lap when she had bad dreams. I thought about the woman Eleanor and I had hoped Mia would become. "Because your mother would have wanted me to give you one last chance," I said finally. "But understand this, Mia. This is the only chance you'll ever get. If you take my help and then try to manipulate me again, if you break any part of this agreement, if you cause me any more pain or trouble, you'll be cut off permanently. No second chances, no explanations, no forgiveness." She nodded frantically. "I understand. I'll do whatever you want." "I want you to become someone your mother could have been proud of," I said. "I want you to figure out how to be a decent human being who doesn't hurt the people who love her." James started drafting the agreement. As he worked, I watched Mia sitting across from me, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I had ever seen her. This wasn't the ending I had imagined when I threw her out of my house 2 weeks ago, but maybe it was the ending Eleanor would have wanted. Whether Mia chose to take advantage of this opportunity or waste it was up to her. But I had done what I could to honor my wife's memory while still protecting myself from further betrayal. The rest was up to Mia. 18 months later, I was sitting in my favorite chair in the living room, reading the Sunday newspaper and drinking my morning coffee, when I heard a soft knock at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I felt that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach that had become my automatic response to unexpected visitors. But when I opened the door, I found Mia standing on my front porch. She looked completely different from the desperate, broken woman who had begged for help in James Henderson's office. Her hair was clean and styled, she was wearing a simple but professional-looking dress, and most importantly, her eyes were clear and calm. "Hello, Dad," she said quietly. "I hope it's okay that I came by. I know I should have called first." I studied her face, looking for any sign of the manipulation or desperation that had characterized our last few encounters, but all I saw was nervous sincerity. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She entered hesitantly, as if she wasn't sure she was really welcome. The house looked different now. I had redecorated some of the rooms and bought new furniture to replace the pieces that held too many painful memories. It was still Eleanor's house in spirit, but it was becoming my own space, too. "The house looks nice," Mia said, looking around the living room. "Different, but nice." "I needed to make some changes," I replied. "Too many ghosts otherwise." We stood there for a moment in awkward silence. Finally, Mia cleared her throat. "I wanted to come by to give you an update on how things are going and to thank you for giving me the chance to get my life together." I gestured for her to sit on the couch while I remained standing. Old habits die hard, and I still wasn't comfortable being vulnerable around her. "How is the counseling going?" I asked. "It's hard," she admitted. "Dr. Martinez doesn't let me get away with making excuses or blaming other people for my choices. She's helping me understand how I became someone who could treat you the way I did." I was surprised by her directness. The old Mia would have tried to minimize what she had done or find ways to justify her behavior. "And what have you learned?" I asked. Mia took a deep breath. "I learned that I've been selfish and entitled my whole life. Mom and you always gave me what I wanted, even when you couldn't really afford it. You sacrificed for me, but I never learned to sacrifice for anyone else." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Dr. Martinez says I developed what she calls narcissistic tendencies. I became so focused on what I thought I deserved that I stopped seeing other people as real human beings with feelings and needs." I sat down in my chair, intrigued despite myself. This was the most self-aware I had ever heard Mia sound. "When Mom got sick," she continued, "I was scared. Scared of losing her, scared of being left with responsibilities I didn't know how to handle, scared of not having enough money, but instead of dealing with those feelings in a healthy way, I convinced myself that you were the problem." "How so?" I asked. "I told myself that you were weak and helpless, that you couldn't take care of yourself without Mom. That made it easier for me to justify treating you like a burden instead of a person. If you were just a problem that needed to be solved, then I didn't have to feel guilty about the cruel things I was planning to do." I felt something shift inside me as she spoke. This wasn't the Mia I had raised, but it wasn't the monster who had thrown me out of my house either. This was someone who was genuinely trying to understand and change herself. "Dr. Martinez also helped me understand something about Melvin," she said. "He didn't make me do anything. I chose to go along with his plans because they gave me an excuse to do things I already wanted to do. I wanted your money, I wanted the house, and I wanted you out of the way. Melvin just gave me permission to admit those feelings. The honesty was startling and painful. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "It doesn't make you look good." Mia smiled sadly. "Because Dr. Martinez says that real change starts with admitting the truth, even when the truth is ugly, especially when the truth is ugly." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote you a letter. A real apology. Not the kind where I try to make excuses or ask for forgiveness. Just an honest acknowledgement of what I did and how it affected you." I took the letter but didn't open it immediately. "There's something else," she said. "I got a job. A real full-time job at an accounting firm downtown. It's entry-level work, but it's honest work, and I'm good at it. I'm supporting myself now." "That's good," I said, and I meant it. "I also wanted you to know that I've been volunteering at a senior center on weekends. Dr. Martinez suggested it as a way for me to understand what I put you through. I spend time with elderly people who have been abandoned or mistreated by their families." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "Dad, listening to their stories, understanding how much it hurts to be thrown away by the people you love, I can't believe I did that to you." I felt my own throat tighten. "It was the worst day of my life," I said quietly. "Worse than losing your mother, because at least her death wasn't intentional cruelty." "I know," she whispered. "And I know that saying I'm sorry isn't enough. It can't undo what I did or take away the pain I caused you." We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, I opened her letter and read it. It was 3 pages long, and every word was honest and heartfelt. She took full responsibility for everything she had done, acknowledged the specific ways she had hurt me, and made no excuses for her behavior. At the end, she wrote, "I don't expect you to forgive me, and I don't expect you to want a relationship with me. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did to you, and I'm sorry. I'm working every day to become someone better, someone you and Mom could be proud of. Not because I think it will earn back your love, but because it's the right thing to do." I folded the letter carefully and set it on the coffee table between us. "There's something I need to tell you," I said. Mia looked up at me anxiously. "Your mother knew she was dying long before she told us," I began. "She had known for months, and during that time she spent a lot of energy trying to figure out how to protect me from you." Mia's face went pale. "She loved you," I continued, "but she also saw who you were becoming. She saw the greed, the entitlement, the willingness to hurt other people to get what you wanted, and it broke her heart." Tears were streaming down Mia's face now. "But she also believed that people could change if they were forced to face the consequences of their actions. That's why she set up the will the way she did. She wanted to protect me, but she also wanted to give you a chance to learn and grow." I leaned forward in my chair. "Your mother would be proud of the work you're doing now. Not because it might earn you forgiveness, but because you're finally becoming the person she always hoped you could be." Mia was sobbing now, but trying to muffle the sound. "I'm not ready to have you back in my life as my daughter," I said gently. "Too much has happened, and trust takes time to rebuild, but I'm proud of you for doing the hard work of changing yourself." She looked up at me through her tears. "What does that mean for us?" I thought about it for a moment. "It means we start very slowly. Maybe we have coffee once a month in a neutral location, and we see how it goes. No pressure, no expectations, just 2 people trying to figure out if they can have a relationship." "I would like that," she said quietly. "And it means that if you continue on this path, if you keep working to be better, then maybe someday we can be family again. Not the way we were before, because that family was built on unhealthy patterns, but maybe we can build something new and better." Mia nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "There's one more thing," I said. "I've been thinking about what Eleanor would want me to do with her inheritance. She left everything to me, but I think she would want some of it to go toward helping other people." Mia looked confused. I'm setting up a scholarship fund in your mother's name. It will help adult students who are trying to change their lives through education and therapy. People who are working to overcome their mistakes and become better. Understanding dawned in her eyes. People like me. People like you, I confirmed. Your mother believed in second chances even when those chances weren't deserved. This seems like a way to honor that belief. We talked for another hour. Not about the past, but about the present and the future. Mia told me about her job, her therapy, her volunteer work. I told her about the changes I had made to the house, the books I was reading, the garden I was planning to plant in the spring. When she got up to leave, we both stood awkwardly by the front door. "Thank you," she said simply, "for the second chance and for not giving up on the idea that I could be better." "Thank you for doing the work to earn it," I replied. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and gave me a brief, gentle hug. It was the first time we had touched since before Eleanor's funeral, and it felt strange but not unwelcome. After she left, I sat back down in my chair and looked around the quiet house. For the first time since Eleanor's death, it didn't feel empty, it felt peaceful. I picked up Mia's letter and read it again. Then I walked to the mantelpiece and placed it next to a photo of Eleanor. My wife had been right, as usual. People could change if they were willing to do the hard work and face the truth about themselves. I wasn't ready to call Mia my daughter again. That would take time, maybe years. But for the first time in a long time, I had hope that someday we might find our way back to each other. Not as the broken family we had been, but as something new and healthier. Eleanor would have liked that.